Before we look at the latest cabinet departure, there are other events, protests and changes of political significance to consider. With a noisy roar from their exhaust pipes, the motorcycle lobby, representing 500,000 licensed riders and 168,000 registered bikes in this state, staged an angry protest outside Parliament this week over recent premium hikes in green-slipped CTP, compulsory third-party motorcycle insurance.
Under this wonderful scheme, insurance companies have been making up to 25% profit a year. 25% profit. Now talk about a super profits tax might be appropriate here, eh? Yeah. Think about this. Around $11 billion in premiums have gone into the scheme since 1999, and only $5.4 billion has gone out in claims. 5.4 gone out in claims, 11 billion going in. 11 minus 5.4. You do the sums, because I'm sick of seeing the greed involved.
They say CTP premiums in the 250cc category have gone up 84% and by 105% for the 1300cc motorbikes. With the rapid increase in motor scooter and commuter bike sales, the cost aggravation was growing. Significantly, the bikers had a greeny edge to their pitch, claiming motorbikes had a lower greenhouse footprint than cars. Most cars only carried one passenger, the driver.
We are already playing a big part in reducing greenhouse emissions. Our bikes use just 2 to 4 litres per 100 kilometres of fuel, which is better than a Prius.
The motorcyclists resent the hundreds of millions of dollars now being spent on cycleways, which they assert are still underutilised. In the interests of road safety and reducing traffic congestion, they want permission to share transitways and bus-only lanes, particularly on the gridlocked M2.
You all know you are being ripped off on CTP insurance.
The Coalition has promised that if elected next March, it will review the actuarial data on which the CTP motorcycle premiums are calculated and make equitable adjustments. The Keneally government, in response, says 50% of CTP premiums have gone down. Rob Colligan, chairman of the Motorcycle Council, acknowledges that, but says New South Wales has the most expensive at-fault insurance system in Australia with few benefits. The council is currently in negotiations with Michael Daly, the police minister, to talk through the complaints with the government. Over recent months, there's been a bitter confrontation between the Keneally government and the local government lobby over a cap on Section 94 developer levies at $20,000 per lot. Many councils have been refusing to process DAs, saying existing ratepayers should not be saddled with infrastructure costs. After more than 100 meetings, Planning Minister Tony Kelly announced the government was lifting the cap for some councils in growth areas.
The government has agreed to, on appropriate greenfield sites, allow the cap to increase to $30,000 to recognise that. But we've also got some short-term and longer-term measures as well. The government is also putting together an infrastructure fund of some $50 million to assist those greenfield councils.
The local government and Shires associations welcomed the levy increase for greenfields councils and the $50 million top-up fund, but are continuing negotiations for a new method of long-term funding for basic community infrastructure. While this represents some reconciliation between state and local government on levies, the housing undersupply and unaffordability crisis remains. A State Treasury report just released showed the house construction rate now was more than half that of 10 years ago. Greens MLC SYLIVA HALE announced her retirement from the upper house this week after a 7-year stint.
This is a decision that I have made entirely by myself and entirely voluntarily.
With the also recently announced retirement of Ian Cohen, the Greens will have a clean-skinned ticket for the election next March, led by David Shoebridge, an industrial barrister and councillor on Wallara Council. Currently, the Greens hold 4 seats on the crossbench, which they share with the Shooters and Fishers Party, Fred Niles' Christian Democrats, and Family First's Gordon Moyes. Robert Borsak, famously seen here with an African bull elephant he'd shot, replaces the late Roy Smith for the Shooters and Fishers in the Upper House next week, leaving Robert Brown to head the party's re-election ticket next March. Also standing for the Upper House at the election is the anti-corruption crusader John Hatton, former member for South Coast and instigator of the Wood Royal Commission. Mr Hatton has come out of retirement to campaign for a Royal Commission into the state planning system. He also wants to depoliticise public administration to restore the concept of Westminster independent, frank and fearless advice, and removing the current unfettered right of ministers to terminate departmental heads without notice and for no reason, known in the state public sector as the Sussex Street Sword of Damocles. Less than a week after she promised attitudinal and behavioural change by Labor in government, Premier Christina Keneally was under attack over the suspension of a former Sydney Harbour Foreshore Authority senior executive alleged to have too close personal links with the Ghazal property family. The allegations and others involving government MPs are under preliminary investigation by the ICAC.
Mr Speaker, I advise the House that the member for Heathcote has resigned his position as a minister in my cabinet.
Then on Wednesday, Premier Keneally had to announce the resignation of Ports and Waterways Minister Paul McLeay for inappropriate use of his computer to access pornography and gambling sites. He'd done nothing illegal.
I made clear to the member that I expect ministers to use the resources of office appropriately, and that this behaviour is not the standard I expect of a minister.
First of all, I just want to say I'm quite embarrassed to be standing here before you.
If there is such a thing as courage in facing public shame and humiliation, Mr McLeay displayed it when he faced the media outside the bear pit.
This behaviour is not the standard that we expect of our cabinet ministers. I apologise to the Premier, my parliamentary colleagues, my electorate and the community.
Paul McLeay will remain the member for Heathcote and will seek party pre-selection for another run next March. The internal audit which named Mr McLeay also identified computers in the offices of Christian Democrats MLC, the Reverend Fred NILE. The Reverend NILE also faced the media cameras. He denied any inappropriate use.
And I've just had a report from the Clerk of the Parliament showing that there's been nothing viewed on CF NILE dealing with anything related to pornography. In fact, the only items that are showing are what they call pop-ups. So I'm happy for the media to photocopy or have a copy of this particular report. I've just been handed this by the Clerk of the Parliament. So there's definitely no porn movies or films on Fred NILE's official login name computer. My senior researcher has conducted a lot of research into the pornography industry at my request, but none of my staff have given me a total commitment that none of them have viewed a pornographic movie, nor do they have the slightest interest in doing so.
The presiding officers, the Speaker Richard Torbay and Upper House President Amanda Fazio, are expected to order an external review of internet usage. Names of other MPs whose computers have recorded excessive hits on questionable sites are also soon expected to be identified.